right-hand side, web development, lesson 27. Working with web-based forms. So today we're gonna talk about how to work with web-based forms. So let's look at we're gonna look at talk about how HTML form works, how to create a front end for an HTML form, how to name pieces of the form data, include hidden fields, choose the correct form input controls, how to validate the form data, how to submit form data, how to use the form object with JavaScript. And so let's start with how HTML forms. So an HTML form is part of a web page that includes areas where users can enter information, and it's usually sent back to a server. So it could include like email address, database, another system. The data is usually sent to a backend system for further processing. In our example, in this that I'm going to show you, we're still going to be working on the front end. So I'm going to show you how to, because we don't have a backend system. But this also applies to what would happen if you sent it to a backend system. And then the backend system usually requires knowledge of a programming language, such as depending on what the backend system is written in. So creating a form, you just start with the form tag to create a form in HTML. The form tag attributes usually have the name, the method, and there's two methods, either get or post, and then there's an action, which is the address for sending the form data. So one input element that you can have in a form is the input tag. And one of the attributes, the type attributes on the input tag that you can give it is either text or password. Text allows you, as you type it, you can see what you're typing, versus the password type. It's just when you type, you just see little asterisks appear because it hides your input. The size attribute approximates how many characters the input box should be. And the name attribute is the name that is passed to the backend system. You can label each piece of form data. Forms have a label element that you can create. And then there's a for attribute that associates the label with the input tag's name. You can group form elements together using legend field set elements. The legend elements displays the description of the group, and the field set elements organizes the group. You can also have hidden data in your form. So what you could do is, if there's certain data you want to pass back to the backend system, but you don't want the users to necessarily see that data, there's a input type called hidden that lets you send that data to the backend system. Right, another type of form element is the checkbox. As you can see, it's still an input element, but the type is checkbox this time. And in JavaScript, you can actually get to that value in that there's a check property on that element that you can check to see if it's someone checked the checkbox or not. Radio button is another element, and this is kind of a unique type of button in that when you select it, it kind of deselects everything else in the group, and I'll show you an example of that when we get to our examples. We have selection lists. Basically, it's just a drop-down list that you choose from. I'll show you an example of that. There's certain tag properties you can use. There's the name, the length, etc. Part of that select is the options tag that basically lists all the options that will appear in the select tag. And again, we'll show you an example. There's also text area. If you have a large amount of text that you want to type in, text area is a good one to use. And we also have data lists that you can add to. Talk about that a little bit later. And you can also, in HTML5, you can do form validation by passing this pattern here. And if the text doesn't fit that pattern, the browser will give you an error message. And the nice thing about this is this error message happens on the client side, so no data gets passed back until it fits the pattern. And then submitting the form data, you have an input type of submit. So when you click submit, it sends the form data back to the backend program. Okay, another thing you're going to want to do is you're going to want to access your form data with JavaScript, which is kind of basically what we'll be doing. So we'll go through that in a bit. So one way to do it is to document the name of the form and the element, or you can get it by name. Usually what I do is I put IDs on there and use the get element by ID to get that form element. And then displaying the data, once you have that form element, the value property has the value that was entered. Okay, so we're going to talk about local storage in a bit, but before we do that, let's show you a quick demo. All right, so let's say we have this website and that we've set up here, and so I'm going to click on this register, and this is a very detailed form that we've created to register for our website. So we're going to go ahead and type in John at example.com as their email. The password, I'm just going to put Sesame. All right, and then what we're going to put an address. We'll put 1 Main Street, Waterbury. And this is where we give you an example of the select, which is basically just a drop down. We want to select Connecticut, 06416. Oh, sorry, 06704. And then this is an example of a checkbox. So we click on checkbox. We want to even type in some interests, table tennis as an interest, and then this is a radio button. So as you can see, you can choose. When you choose one, it deselects the other one because only one in the group can be chosen. So we're going to leave that as mail. Hit register. And what happens is it automatically logs me in and throws me back home. And if you notice, what I did is the register button is now not there. Okay, so how does that work? Well, let's start. We'll start with the register HTML. And the form is very large here. So what I've done here is I've put a bunch of inputs. So these are the text input. Here's the password. I put 2 passwords in here so I wouldn't forget. And then I put the street, city. Here's the example of the select. Here you have, again, I have IDs to reference all of these. So here's all the options. So these are all the state codes. So I put all 50 state codes. It took me a while to type that, but we did that. We have a zip code. And then we have just the checkbox for the newsletter. We have a text area that we created for our interests, and then we had the radio button because we did input type of radio for male and female there. Okay, so the way that we've kind of set up our JavaScript is we created this one JavaScript file that everything's contained in. And then what we do is we kind of fire this, we have these init functions in JavaScript that we call when we first start the app. And it gets called here. And what does that do? So let's go all the way over here. So try to organize this so that I put comments here to kind of break up what these variables do. And that's a good habit to get into so that your variables and stuff aren't just thrown all over the place. They're kind of organized so they're easy to find. Okay, so here, all my buttons on my form, so the register button form, I get that element ID, or I get the element in here, so it's called register button. All my form inputs, so if you recognize you had the username, password 12, street, city, state, zip, newsletter, interest, all of it's here. We have, we'll talk about local storage later, but here's my local storage variables, here's my error variables, and then I also have my menu elements. So I put IDs on the menu elements because I need to do some certain things with, I need to make certain menus appear and disappear depending on whether if you're logged in or not. And then I grouped all my error message functions, so if someone mistypes a username or password or doesn't enter certain information, I don't, I display an error message. Then we have these handler functions. So here, these handler functions, we handle different clicks. So there's a logout button. So if someone clicks logout, it does a certain thing. If when you go to log in, this is the code that it kicks off. This is the register. So when they click on the register button, first thing it checks to make sure that password 1 and 2 are equal, the street, city, state aren't blank, because I need them not to be blank, that they've actually selected male or female on the gender. And then what we do here is we're saving the data in local storage. And I think this is a good place to go. So when this function kicks off when you click on that register, when we click down that register button, and it's probably good to see what happens or how your local storage works. So what we do with local storage, you use local storage to permanently save data locally on the client. Storage lasts until it's deleted, and then you use the window local storage set item function to save string key value pairs, and then you use the get item to retrieve them. So if we go back to our code here, what we're doing is we save these in a JavaScript object. So we create our JavaScript object here. This 2 curly braces says this is going to be an object. So then when they're adding elements to the object, you can say dot and then whatever the property is of the object. So here we're doing username, which is the email that's entered. The password, since I know it matches because I did a check, I just grab one of the passwords. Then we have street, city, state, everything else. And then here what we're doing is we're checking to see if male got checked. If not, we assume female. Because up here we check to make sure that both male and female are not unchecked, both unchecked. Because they're both unchecked, that means no one clicked a gender. All right, and then this is where we have to store it. There's a function in JavaScript called json.stringify that takes a JavaScript object and creates basically a string out of it. Because in the local storage, we can only store strings. So we have to convert it from a JSON object to a string, which is what this does, and then we store it in this reginfo. So if you want to see and check that your stuff got stored, the way you do it is you actually have to go into the inspection, and if you look down here, I'm going to go all the way up here, and you look at application, all your storage is over here. So here's there's a local storage section under storage, and then you look for the website that matches your URL. So this matches, so you click on there, and you can see we're storing we stored something with a key of reginfo, and this is the data we entered here. So you see it's in JSON format, and we have a bunch of key value pairs in the JSON. So we have the username, password, etc. And all that's there, it's stored in there. All right, so let's go back here. And this just shows you the local storage. Session storage, let's talk about that a little bit, because that's this section. All right, so session, you want to use session storage to save data locally for a user's current session. The storage lasts until the browser is closed, and you want to use the set item again to save and get item to retrieve. And that's what we're doing here with the session storage. Now, because we want to permanently save the registration info, so that's why it's in local storage. But session storage is temporary because we just want to save whether the user's logged in or not, right? So we would set this logged in property to true. Now, if we look back at our example here, I do have a session storage, but my log, oh, and it says it's logged in, so it's set the logged in property to true, as you can see here. And that shows that. And then these are other, this is like the main initialization. What this does is it saves this logout handler, click handler, sets that. It gets the logged in item because we have to determine what we're going to hide, because if the user's logged in, so we check to see if it's true. If they're logged in, we want to hide the login menu and the register menu. Because they're logged in, they don't need to register, they don't need to log in. If it's false, then we want to display we want to hide the logout menu. Because they're, let's see, because they're not logged in. Yeah, sorry, yeah, if it's false, that means they're not logged in, so we want to hide the logout menu. And then we want to make sure the register menu is available, so if they want to register. Okay, these are particular ones for the init login. So we set the event handler for the login button, and because this means we're in the login page, or we're on the registration page. So we have to set these, but we still want to do all the initialization. So we still call init up from here. So that way we're only calling one method in our HTML, one function in our HTML. Okay, and that's pretty much it for that functionality. So hopefully that helps. Again, you can rewind to see what's going on here. So I just want to demo very quickly the logout. So if I click on logout, notice logout disappears, and now I can either register again, or I can go ahead and log in. So I'm going to go ahead and log in. So I think it was John at example.com, and then Sesame was my password. So this should be able to log in now. And I did log in, because now I just have a logout button, and I have my fetch, which we're going to talk about in a little bit. Okay, so now that we have that, the last thing we're going to talk about in today's lesson is the fetch, How does that work? Basically, it's used to call APIs, and the syntax is fetch, and then you give it a URL. We're going to be using the Star Wars API as the example. And so we're going to go ahead and try to pull all the Star Wars people in, calling the API. Fetch returns what's called a promise. And basically with the promise, the results are processed. You process the results in the then clause. And then we'll talk about what the then clause is. You can also use async await, which we're not going to use because this is more of an advanced topic, so we're not going to cover that. But we're going to talk a little bit about promises. So first, let's go over here and show you what fetch does. So if I click on the fetch link, it takes me to the fetch page, and what it did is it called the Star Wars API and it pulled all of these Star Wars characters using the API. So how did we do that? All right, so let's go down here. Let's go to the fetch.html. And here, all we're doing here, again, we're calling init, and then we're calling the Star Wars API. Again, this is over here, the Star Wars API function. So what do we do here? If we look over here, the other thing is we're printing everything out in this fetch results div. This is where everything gets printed out. So we get a reference to that fetch results div, and then we call fetch. We give it the API endpoint, which is this. And then this is that then clause that I was talking about. Is a couple things happens. First, we get the response. Then we have to return it because this is a promise, so we don't have all the data. So when we call the promise, the second then it processes those results that come back from the JSON. So now results here is a JSON string. So what we're going to do is we have to build up the string. So we have a placeholder for all of our people. And then we use this for loop to loop through the results. So there's a results property on the results JSON. So that's why we do results.results. Because each result in the array, the internal JSON array, is a person. So now we're using person for each person that we're iterating through, and then we're just going to print out their name. And I put a BR here so it looks nicer on the HTML. So it stores this, it keeps doing a plus equal, so it keeps appending to this element, to this string, people string. And then what we do, we print it out by setting the inner HTML on the fetch results div to this entire string that we've been building up in memory. Okay, and then that's what gives us this output right here. All right, so I know that was a lot of information in a short period of time. But again, if you have any questions, please feel free to reach out to me, send me an email. We can schedule to meet. You can also go back through the videos. Again, you can pause the videos. It's another way of going through them, especially on the code side, to kind of see how everything was set up. But hopefully this helps. Again, you feel free to reach out to me if there's any issues. And then this is the last lesson in the series. Thanks for joining me, and we'll talk again later when we talk about the project. All right, thanks.